The kingdom of God is living in me and in you. The kingdom of God is in bloom. The waiting is over. The word has been sown. Here's the fruit. The kingdom of God is in bloom.
Hello? You're listening to Singled Out with Gabrielle Denise.
Hola, everyone. Welcome back to Singled Out. I'm your host, Gabrielle Denise, and in today's episode, we're going to finish up what we've been talking about this month.
Thank you to everybody who has donated towards the campaign this month to keep Singled Out on air. So far, we are at almost $100, and I would love it if you would take the time to donate some money towards the show, if you have it, to help us to stay on air.
So, as you guys know, September is Suicide Awareness Month, and we've had some amazing guests on here to talk all about grief and how it has played a part in their journey. And if you guys want to, you can go back and listen to any of those episodes, and you can find the link to all of the episodes by going to @SingledOut on Instagram, and then going to the link in the bio. That's where I post all the episodes. But this episode is really important to me because I'm going to be discussing the topic of suicide more in depth, including some signs that someone you know might be struggling, the process of what happens when you call a suicide hotline, and how you can be there for a friend. Now, all of these things are just from my experience, from what I witnessed from dealing with suicidal ideations and that whole process for about a whole year. And I really hope that at the end of this episode, you can take some of the things that I went through and maybe some of the things that I've learned and apply them to your situation. I do want to do a disclaimer, though, that I am not a licensed therapist and that all of these things should be taken with a grain of salt. Anyway, before we get started, let's get going on to the moment of inspiration. A lot of times we get the idea that people in the Bible didn't struggle with mental health, but here we have the prophet Elijah. Elijah ended up being a really, really important prophet. But here in 1 Kings 19, we find him in a very strange situation. So I'm going to start from verse 3, and this is the NIV version. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. Now, I just want you to sit with that for a minute. This is Elijah. This is one of the most famous prophets of all times. And here we find him in the wilderness near a bush praying that God might take his life. And I know that I've actually prayed this prayer a few times. But what strikes me is what happens next. All at once, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lied down again. Notice that the angel didn't tell him, "Oh, get up, Elijah," and try to shame him because of his prayer. Nor did God look down on him and say, "I'm going to strike you down for what you've asked." Instead, the angel encouraged him to eat. And then, once he ate, you also notice that Elijah didn't just jump back up and start his journey again. The Bible says that he laid back down, showing that he was still going through that journey of grief even after he got something to eat. Picking up in verse 7, the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? So I want to go back to verses 11 through 12. We noticed that the presence of God was not in the loud and the powerful, but instead it was of a gentle whisper. And I just want to let you know that if you're in a period where you feel like you're so discouraged and depressed and that God can't hear you, just know that maybe sometimes you have to get quiet so that you can hear them. Anyway, so that was our moment of inspiration. We're going to go on a short commercial break, and make sure you stay tuned because we have some important information coming up next.
Hola everyone, my name is Gabrielle Denise and I am the host of Singled Out, one of the only radio shows in Atlanta targeted to youth. As part of the ministry of my show, I try my best to make the show accessible. No guests are ever charged to appear on the show. However, running this show requires funds, and even though I know that God will provide, I need your help. If you have heard even one thing on Singled Out that has changed your thought process or spoke to your spirit, I would love it if you would sow a seed into the show this September. I am trying to raise $3,000, which would cover the next year of Singled Out's fees and help us to keep telling stories that matter. You can donate by texting stories to 53555, or you can securely donate it by visiting positivelygabriellerice.com/the-radio-show. You have until September 30th to give. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting a show that helps to keep youth moving in this crazy, crazy world and be a light into the next generation. I'll see you on Thursday at 10:30 a.m.
You're walking shopping or on your favorite trail. You get that feeling somebody's coming up on you. What do you do to be prepared in today's world? Hi, I'm Holly Reese. I'm the founder of Warrior Defenders. As a certified tactical self-defense instructor, I'm specializing in women's self-defense. All women of all ages have the ability to learn how to defend themselves effectively. With technical drills to build their survival skills, you can be your own hero. Classes and private seminars are available. Learn today to have a safer tomorrow. WarriorDefenders.com.
Hello everyone, this is DJ Commando of a 45's Affair radio show where I play all vinyl 45s. You're listening to WQEE 99.1 FM, Newnan, Georgia.
I want to talk about the difference between two terms. So number one is suicidal ideations, and number two is a suicide attempt. So before I called a suicide hotline, I never even knew what a suicidal ideation was. So basically what this is when somebody has the idea in their head that they want to end their life, but they don't necessarily act on these things. So for example, say if somebody's like sitting on a porch and they think, you know, how easy would it be for me to just go and just jump off this porch right now? The biggest thing that separates these ideations from the actual actions is that the person is not making any movements towards doing that thing. The different dictionary definition of suicidal ideations is intrusive thoughts in preoccupation with death and dying. In fact, when I was going to therapy, I was talking to my therapist and telling her about the thoughts I was having, and she was telling me and reassuring me that it was okay for me to have these thoughts as long as I wasn't acting on them. And I wanted to clarify this because it's going to be important as we travel on further into this episode. So here are some signs that somebody that you know might be contemplating wanting to end their life. The first thing is that they start asking questions or talking about death or dying. So when I was in middle school, I actually had a best friend, and she would often say weird things. And at the time, I didn't really know what these things meant, but she would ask questions that were very big, about universalism, or about, what it would feel like if this happened, or what it would feel like if that happened. And they were things that were kind of crazy, I wonder what it feels like to get hit by a car, or, I wonder what it feels like to get your leg chopped off or something. 4 years later, I found out that this same friend had died by suicide. And if you notice that your friend has started to make these comments out of nowhere, and this is the first time they're doing this, you might want to sit down with them and ask them more about where these thoughts are coming from. This is especially true with children, and usually they're going to get more curious about things and ask questions to see and gauge your reaction. And if you're not paying attention, it can be very easy to miss these things, because a lot of times these people will play it off as kind of like a joke. And so you might be thinking in your brain ooh, that is really messed up what they said. But because of their tone of voice, or because of their demeanor when they're saying it, you might brush it off oh, they're just joking about it. But I just want to encourage you to really listen to the words that your friends are saying, because when I was in the pit of my depression and isolation stage, and I was having these ideations, I was too afraid to really talk about what was going on. But I would make jokes about death or dying. And that leads me perfectly on to the second sign that one of your friends is struggling, is that they start spending a lot of time alone. Now, everybody needs alone time. That's obvious. We can't be with people 24/7, but if you start to notice, for example, if you have a teenager and they're usually out and about in the family room with everyone else, and then all of a sudden they start just being in their room 24/7, or they stop hanging out with all of their friends, or they just hold themselves up, you might want to consider talking to them and asking them what's going on. Because a lot of times when people have these ideations and these thoughts, it comes with a lot of shame. And because of this, they don't want their friends or people around them to know that something is wrong or that something is different. And this is actually where I want to bring up a very poignant episode that I did with Michelle Anderson on the first week of September. And I'm going to play a soundbite just a minute about what she said about losing her son, and about how his actions changed right before he ended up dying by suicide a few months later.
With JJ, we started noticing changes in him behavioral-wise in October, which was 2 months after he started school in middle school. And so we tried to get counseling, and they were like, oh, we're 4 months out still.
Yeah.
We're like, what?
It's crazy.
I'm telling you, my son, there's something wrong with him, and you're telling me 4 months for him to talk to someone?
Right.
And so, then we let him know, and he calmed down, and he was like, okay, Mom, I'm going to do better. And he did. He did really good. And then all of a sudden, December, January, he had that same behavior all over again.
Right.
And so, by the time we called again, they told us 5-6 months. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. You guys see the need.
Right, exactly.
But I lost him 2 months after that. So, it's very important that these programs be well known and well out there for our youth, our parents.
So as you can see, both of these things, seeing somebody spending a lot more time alone and asking questions about death or dying, the biggest thing is listening to them and paying attention to what actions that they're doing. Another sign that somebody is struggling with their mental health and possibly considering ending their life is that they get extremely irritable. So if you find that your happy-go-lucky friend or spouse or teenager has all of a sudden gotten very angry and irritated with you, and there's been no big life situation or change that is causing that, you might want to look into that more and really talk to that person. And the last sign is that some strange tools start to show up in their room. So if you start to notice that your teenager or that your child is collecting sharp objects or things that are not normal for a teenager, then those are some things that you want to look out for. These are just a few of the signs. Many of them don't even show signs. So don't beat yourself up if you have lost somebody to suicide recently and you either didn't notice the sign or there really were no signs, because sometimes they aren't. So the next thing that I really want to talk about is what will happen if you call a suicide hotline. So this is no fault of anyone that I know, but when I was growing up, there were often jokes made in the circles that I was in about if you were like acting super crazy one day or something like that, that there would be a white van that would come and they would strap you down and take you to a mental institution. And because of that, I was so scared when I had these ideations that if I tried to reach out and get help, or that if I tried to go and talk to someone, that they would just call this magical white van on me and that I would end up getting strapped down and taken to this hospital where, you know, there was all padded walls and white rooms. And the idea freaked me out so much that for about 6 months, I said not a peep to anybody who was around me. In fact, many of the people who are still my friends today don't even know what I was struggling with during that year of time span. And that actually really scares me. If I had had a suicide attempt and it had been fatal, a lot of my friends and family members would have been like, you know, there was no signs, because I never ever like reached out. And so I want to encourage you to be really careful about the terms that you use, even in a joking manner, because they can really hit deep. But anyway, when I did finally ask for help and reach out to a suicide hotline, I was so surprised at how kind and caring these people were. Number one is that a person will answer. Most hotlines are 24/7. You don't have to worry that you're going to pick up the phone and call and nobody's going to answer. And if nobody answers, definitely call again. Number two is that they're going to ask you for some basic information. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be quite a bit of information, but you also have the choice to remain anonymous. And the best thing about these calls is that this information that they're getting from you is helping to figure out how best they can help you. So once the person on the phone ask you about your symptoms and they have a significant amount of information, based on what they say, they're going to help you to move forward. Now, for me, since I was having ideations, which I didn't know this at the time, they told me that it would be best that I went and got some counseling. And they also told me that they also gave me like a referral to the counselors. And the best thing about going through a hotline, whereas if you had gone, is that the hotline has connections, so they can get you an appointment within the next like week or two. Now, what I want to tell you too about the hotline is that sometimes you might not have resources in your area. At least for me, a lot of the counselors that they recommended me to were an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes away from my house. Now we've reached the third and final part of this episode, which is where we're going to talk about what to do if you find out that your friend is considering leaving the world, and also if you're in a very high stress situation where you are like the only thing standing between them and then them like ending their life, which I pray that nobody ever has to be in this situation. So the first thing to do is to alert somebody that you trust immediately. Now, you might feel like a traitor for doing this because many times this person that will tell you this will be like, do me a favor and don't tell anyone else about this. This person that you trust should be able to help connect that person to help, because the last thing that you want is for that to be on your conscience. Number 2 is that whatever you do, don't leave the person alone. You don't know what's going to happen when you leave the room. And so if you can, try everything that you can do to just sit with the person. You don't always have to talk. Sometimes you can talk, but a lot of times just being there for them is the biggest thing that you can do. Number 3 is to try to avoid phrases like, it's going to be okay, or it's not a big deal, or everything happens for a reason. These phrases might seem helpful in normal situations, but when somebody is in that state, they're not thinking clearly. And so phrases like that can really set them off and cause them to take actions that they wouldn't usually take. Instead, you want to try phrases like, I'm here for you. What can I do? What do you need? How can I assist you? These show that the person is not alone and that they can trust you to help. Next is to try to remove all sharp or dangerous objects from the room. This is one of the most important things that you can do. Even things like shoelaces or really sharp objects like scissors that in a normal situation would be okay to have around could become really dangerous if you have a friend who is attempting to end their life. The next thing is to stay calm. I don't know if you've ever been around kids, but when kids fall down, they'll also usually have a moment where they look to their caretaker and they gauge the reaction based on the caretaker. So say if they fall down and the caretaker is like, oh my gosh, then the kid starts crying because they notice that their caretaker is freaking out. In this way, somebody who is in an emotionally vulnerable situation such as this is looking to you and seeing how you react. So you want to try your best to stay calm no matter what. And the last thing that you want to do is to avoid blame statements or relating it to religion or in any way. Now, I know I'm a religious person, and so I believe a lot in the spiritual world and that much of our mental health issues and stuff like that are related to our spiritual health. However, when somebody is in a situation where they're attempting to end their life, that is not the time to tell them that, you won't go to heaven if you do this, or, you have a spirit in you. Those types of things can be shaming statements, and once again, they can be really, really traumatic for somebody who is already dealing with a lot as is. And I also want to encourage you that if you ever find yourself in this situation, don't be afraid to call 911 and contact the authorities. If you can, you're going to want to step outside of the room to do this so that the person doesn't hear you, because that can be really like a trigger as well. But if you can just maybe leave the door cracked and step into the hallway and call the authorities and then stay with that person and do all steps outlined, that can really help. And these are all of the things that I wish that somebody else had done for me when I was attempting to end my life about 2 years ago. But thanks to God, I am still here, and now I'm so grateful to be able to share some things that you can do to help out a friend. I do also want to mention that in every case, there's outliers. Sometimes, no matter what you do, the person has it in their head that they're going to end their life. And so if you do all of you can and the person still ends up doing that, just know that you don't have to feel shame or blame for that, because you can't take somebody's choice away. and they're going to decide to do what they're going to do. But the best thing that you can do in that case is to try to just be there for them as long as possible. And once again, I pray that none of you guys listening to this show ever have to be put into that situation, because I couldn't imagine what it would be like. And so that was today's episode. I really hope that you guys gained at least one tidbit of information. And even if this information doesn't apply to you right now, I encourage you to just stick it in your back pocket for a rainy day, because you never know what's going to happen when you might come upon a time when you might need it. Now for my favorite segment, which is the Song of the Week. So we mentioned the artist Ecclesia a few weeks ago and their song Baptized in Fire, which was a hit. But this week we're coming in with another Ecclesia song. This one is a little bit more tame, but it's just as good, and it's called Excellence by Ecclesia featuring Sarah Elkins. I love this song because it's a little bit more in my wheelhouse, in that it's a song that you would hear on the radio most likely, but it's also one of those songs that I've never heard before. I give it a 10 out of 10 for creativity, a 3 out of 10 for repetitiveness, and I definitely think that you guys should give it a listen. So without further ado, here's your Song of the Week, which is Excellence by Ecclesia.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
God, I need you, 'cause I'm burning out when I try to do it on my own. God, I'm broken, and I'm not even close to the person you made me to be. I made mistakes wondering how did I get here? What do I do? God, I need direction, 'cause I'm in fear, not of you, but of man. I want your will, but I don't know how to get there. Need your truth to come take over my head. Lord, I'm desperate, begging Jesus, make me excellent. Oh, walking worthy of the crossing by my Messiah. With diligence, oh, tunnel vision till the day it's time to retire.
I am chosen, called by a name, given the strength to remain from the darkness and into your light. I will forever abide. You have called, then you will equip me. You will cause me to stand in your righteousness, oh God. Come and lead me on. Give me a heart of flesh from a heart of stone. I can't keep doing it on my own. I believe that you will make me like you.
Excellent, oh, walking worthy of the crossing by my Messiah. With diligence, oh, tunnel vision till the day it's time to retire.
testament. Oh, lead me, God, to walk in excellence, pure and holy, standing blameless. My life will be a living testament. Oh, lead me, God, to walk in excellence, pure and holy, standing blameless. My life will be a living testament. Lead me, God, to walk in excellence, pure and holy, standing blameless. My life will be a living testament.
Excellent, walking worthy of the cross and by my Messiah with diligence. Tunnel vision till the day it's time to retire.
That was today's episode of Singled Out. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you follow us on Instagram at singleout._, where we share more stories that matter and quotes for the rest of your week. Also, make sure you visit www.positivelygabriellerice.com for more information about what is going on in this awesome community. I'll see you next week.